You know, if you asked me what my favourite Nintendo series was, would I say Fire Emblem? Nope. Would I say Zelda? Still nope. Will I say Mario? Well, yeah, 3 awesome series. You know, you might want to take a look at the title, guys, because it's Pokemon. Never, in my opinion, has there been such an ingenious concept for a game series that has spawned many new ideas to each passing game introduced, along with such a brilliant replay value in almost every game. And things seem to be stepping up with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire on the horizon, so I've decided what better way to do my first countdown ever than with my top 5 Pokemon games. Now, first thing to keep in mind are the games in the main series that I haven't played. These include Yellow and Ruby and Sapphire, though there are actually quite a few others that I had never played all the way through. Second, the rules. Actually, on this occasion, there really aren't that many. I guess I'd probably have to say only one game per generation. However, that does mean for this particular countdown that remakes will count for the generation that they are remaking and not the generation they are released in. Oh yeah, and no spin-offs, because I've never played them. Finally, I'll be ranking these games mainly on enjoyability and maybe slightly on nostalgic values and less on the innovations of the generation it was respective to, because that's saved for another list. Hopefully I won't get off track and mess up that rule. On the contrary though, if it's a sister game or a second installment, then I'll probably end up including the innovations that made it better than its predecessors. Well, I think that's everything sorted and out of the way. Let's begin. Pretty ironic to start off at number 5 with the most recent installment to the series, especially with all the hype this game got for a solid 9 months before its release. So anyway, I might not like Pokemon X and Y as much as other entries on this list, but they are definitely faithful installments to the franchise. With all that said, there are also a ton of problems out with this game as well, but I'll cover the positives first. For starters, X and Y are the first main series games on the 3DS, but not the first 3D Pokemon games, mind you. Because of this, X and Y are easily the best looking Pokemon games ever. Even if I do prefer sprites and was not too happy about the transition at first, but this is simply beautiful. Now, as I said, I won't really talk about any of the innovations introduced such as Mega Evolutions, but I will say this. Number 1, the region is gorgeous. Considering that I went on the French exchange at my school only a few months ago, I can safely say that it doesn't look too much like France, aside from the Eiffel Tower lookalike in Lumio City. However, that doesn't mean that the region is bad. Oh no, it's great. Gorgeous 3D landmarks, even if some of the caves were way too short, that doesn't even hold a candle to the greatness of this region. Second, trainer customization. And, to be honest, I only have 2 words to say. About time. I also like the addition of Super Training and Pokemon and Me. I won't go into them in ridiculous depth, but I'll go over the basics. Super Training is basically the much improved EV training. Non-competitive players won't be too interested in this feature, but I like it. I don't like Pokemon and Me as much as I like Super Training, but it does make you feel like you're connected with those creatures that you stick into those tiny balls of yours. Third, and this is a big one, pun intended, the Pokédex. This is the largest Pokédex we've ever had in a Pokemon game to date. More than Platinum's 209. More than Heart Gold and Soul Silver's 256. Hell, even more than Black and White 2's 300. The Kalos region is home to 454 Pokemon, even if only 69 of them, are actually new Pokemon. I'm not going to complain, I mean, seriously, 454 new Pokemon? That's ridiculous. But anyway, now I'm going to delve into the negatives. First, how do I put it? Oh, I know. It's way too easy. Seriously, even though the region of Kalos was huge, I finished the game in a day. 1 day! And by the time I got to the Elite Four, because of the cheap EXP share, all of my Pokemon were well above level 70, facing mid-level 60s, and, to add insult to injury, all of the gym leaders had only 3 Pokemon, and all of the Elite Four had only 4 Pokemon. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I know that Gen 5 did the same thing, but at least they had Pokemon with high enough levels for the battles to be a challenge. It's not even like you could say that Game Freak did this on purpose to appeal to younger audiences as an excuse. Because you know what? I'm 14, most fans I see on the internet are in their 20s, and over the time period of 15 years, do you not think that fans might have grown up a bit since then? This is the same reason I didn't appreciate the really linear region in the first Unova games. See, it's aspects like these that make me want to take the game and throw it across the room. Kinda like Dark Souls, but at least that game came with rage insurance. The second thing, even though it might be nitpicking, it still does bother me. I think that X and Y ruin the cries of old Pokemon. Yeah, even though the music is great and the cries seem to work for the new Pokemon, I think they've completely ruined the cries for the old Pokemon. Easily the best, or worst, examples of this are Heracross, Charizard, and Skarmory. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Finally, the story. Well, I really wasn't sure what to think after finishing it. It was kind of emotional, yes, but only at the end of the story and at the end of the game. Everything else just felt rushed. And this isn't just the story I'm talking about here, it's the entire game. All I did, for the most part, was enter a new town or city, go into random houses filled with unimportant people, possibly fight the criminal organisation, and fight the gym. In between towns and cities, you'll probably have to go through a route or cave filled with trainers. Seriously, it feels like going back to Gen 1, which I can also acknowledge that Game Freak's target market of these games were probably Gen 1 fans, but using the same sort of gameplay was not a good idea. Just give them the Kanto starters and they would have been just fine, Game Freak. You didn't need to include any of their old features. But now what you really want to hear about in terms of the story. What are my thoughts on Team Flare? Okay, I'm not going to beat around the bush, but to put it bluntly, they're quite possibly my least favourite crime organisation of all time, even more so than Team Rocket. I would say that they're kind of like the weaker version of Team Galactic. Now before any of you have a fit, I will say that I do like Lysandra. I see him as Team Flare's saving grace. There's only one problem I have with him though. He's nothing like Team Flare itself. It would be like a university professor teaching a bunch of slowpokes and spinners. His motive to me kinda made sense. The world is cruel, so let's make it better by destroying it and creating it again. Much like Team Galactic. In fact, if I could say one thing against their motive, it would be that they almost directly copy and pasted Team Galactic's motive. Anyway, Lysander himself really struck me as a villain. He seemed different. He didn't want to do whatever it was that his mind was telling him to do, and this was shown throughout the story. But, as you probably guessed, the main thing I hate about Team Flare are the grunts themselves. I hate them. And not because they're good villains, oh no, because trust me, I can tell when there's a good villain. For example, when I watched the film Gladiator, I absolutely hated the villain. But it was in a good way, because you just kept chuckling to yourself thinking, if I was evil, I want to be like that guy. I'm sure some of you can understand what I'm trying to say here. The Team Flare grunts, admins, and commanders for that matter, are weak and especially unmemorable. At least the Team Galactic commanders were memorable thanks to their difficult Pokemon, but these guys? I couldn't even remember their names. Hell, they're so weak that they fall over from the sheer power of your Pokemon. You don't see other NPCs in the main game do that. I think the last thing I'll talk about is the post-game. Oh, how pitiful it is. Seriously, aside from the look of side quests, Zygarde, the Mega Zones and Kailude City, there really is nothing else you can really do. After 2 of the largest post-games ever, this is especially disappointing. But anyway, I think that wraps up all I'd like to say about these games for now. Gee, I went on for a long time talking about these games. So, while X and Y do have their flaws, some perhaps even a little game-breaking, they're still Pokemon games. And even though it seems like I was completely bashing these games, I still like them, and I'll always be satisfied to pick them up and start the journey again. And even though I wanted to say more about these games, it's like I said before, that's saved for another list. Oh boy, now we're really getting started. So Gen 3 is when Pokemon started to get really good, and in my opinion, Pokemon Emerald was the main selling point of the entire generation. And while Ruby and Sapphire were good in their own rights, give me Emerald any day. So first things first, Emerald is a sister game. No duh. But seriously, for those of you that don't know, a sister game is basically improves on its predecessors, and Emerald did this pretty damn well. It may only have been a few tweaks to Ruby and Sapphire, but what more can you really expect? I mean, it's not like it's a different game entirely. First, gameplay. Well, it should say something when you start off in a truck, along with finding out on the TV that your dad is in fact a gym leader. You don't really bump into the rivals, May and Wally, very often, but since there are now 2 rivals instead of 1, I can give it a pass. The gym leaders are okay, and I do like them as a whole, but my problem is that not many of them stick out as a character. Aside from Norman, of course. But I really liked some of the wild encounters, especially since you could obtain Pokemon like Aron very early in the game. Very convenient for early on. Now, I will admit that the replay value isn't great for Pokemon standards, and I can't really explain it that well. But it's at least better in that category than Gen 1. But anyway, let's go through the changes. I said the story is more or less unchanged, however there are a few small differences to the game that make it slightly better. This includes a new concept of multi-battling, i.e. battling 2 people that aren't twins or a team, all new battle frontier, even if I only find half of it to be enjoyable, having both Groudon and Kyogre catchable, having both Team Aqua and Team Magma as the criminal organisations, and being able to have a rematch against previous gym leaders in the post-game. The only tweak I didn't like was the change of the 8th gym leader and champion. Steven was an awesome champion, and unfortunately he had to be replaced by Wallace, the original 8th gym leader. Which, don't get me wrong, but when the replaced 8th gym leader uses 3 water types, one of which spans double team and rest, coupled with half the region consisting of, you guessed it, water. And in my opinion, the water is the worst part of not only Emerald, but also Ruby and Sapphire. Even if I can understand why there was so much water, that still doesn't give an excuse for some fatal flaws, such as Fire, Rock and Ground types being a pain to train, so good luck with those guys. But nevertheless, this game is still one of my favourites in the series, and to be honest, if you're a newcomer to Pokemon, then I would suggest starting this game to begin with, and then move your way up later generations. And it's a good thing to be able to have a starting post in something as surprisingly complex as Pokemon.
That's all I have to say about that.
As a young lad, I was never too fond of remakes, because I thought they were just a near copy and paste of the original. When Fire Red and Leaf Green came out, my statement was backed up, since only a few things were changed, such as the graphics, the music, and the exclusion of glitches. Oh, who are we kidding? Gen 2 anyone? This game, my god, this game. Being a reboot of one of the most innovative generations of Pokemon, you already know that this game is going to be awesome. And it doesn't disappoint in the slightest. In terms of gameplay, it isn't too different from before. However, the few tweaks that were involved, I definitely welcomed. First, they include the storyline from both Gold or Silver and Crystal, meaning that not only can you catch your mascot legendary, but also Suicune. As for Raikou and Entei, well, you'll just keep having to search for them in the wild, won't you? Second, and most importantly, one thing that Heart Gold and Soul Silver got that Fire Red and Leaf Green didn't, was the updated physical special split. This, as most of you know, wasn't around in Gens 1, 2 or 3, But the good thing about these games is that they came out in the time of Gen 4. This means that if you were frustrated with Gengar, for example, because it's a special attacker and its stat moves with physical, but now you can use Gengar in this playthrough whenever you want with very little difficulty. One aspect in particular that I was very fond of was Game Freak being able to appear to both old and new audiences at the same time. It certainly appeals to the veterans of Pokemon because, well, obviously Gen 2 remake, am I right? But also the fact that the levels of NPC Pokemon are a little higher than before, making it a bit more of a challenge for fans that have done it all before. In addition, there aren't too many different characters compared to the original Gold and Silver until later on in the postgame. On the other hand, it also appeals to new fans thanks to the top-notch visuals, better moves to use, and an overall more beautiful environment for new fans to get used to. But my personal favourite aspect of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, weirdly enough, is walking with your Pokemon. Aside from Pikachu in Pokemon Yellow, this is the only time that a feature like this has ever happened. You could turn around every so often to check on your Pokemon to see how they were doing, and in some cases, may even be holding an item ready to give to you. It was great to see the first Pokemon in your party free in the fresh air without having to be trapped in tiny Pokeballs. And like everyone else, I do wish that this feature was implemented into later games, but sadly, it wasn't. Why? I don't know, you tell me. I mean, it is kind of acceptable considering that it would be difficult to do this in 3D, but now we're in 2014, and there shouldn't be any excuse for not having a top quality Pokemon game by now. Come on Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, walking with your Pokemon, make it happen. But that's about it honestly. In fact, there really isn't much I can say against this game. Believe it or not, it was originally going to make number 2 on the list. However, the next entry just barely beat it. Okay, so despite what I said at the beginning, I'll fully admit that nostalgia shouldn't be the only reason to put a game high on my list. However, in this case, it isn't. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Platinum is at number 2 on my list. Being the first Pokemon game I ever saw, it's not only great, but also very nostalgic to me, as I implied before. Now, in terms of sister games, I believe that Platinum is the best by far. Yeah, Crystal was good, and as much as I love Emerald, Platinum just takes the cake. And it pretty much defines what a sister game should do, providing many improvements that made it an improvement to the default installments. Let's start with the Pokédex. This is one of the only things I didn't like about Diamond and Pearl, because there weren't even that many Gen 4 Pokemon in the Pokédex and only 2 fully evolved fire types. However, when Platinum came along, the game jumped from 151 national Pokemon to 209, adding quite a few Pokemon from previous gens, as well as adding more of the Gen 4 evolutions. This gives a lot more diversity in each playthrough I do, allowing me to choose a different team every time. And that's just the beginning. What about battling? Well, you already know that Gen 4 went insane with the battling system thanks to the physical special split, but I'm talking about Platinum on its own. First, the attack animations are more fluent, coupled with a slightly quicker battle speed. Considering that slow speed was the main reason why people didn't like Diamond and Pearl, it was a huge improvement to have this. Second, the gyms. Despite the fact that the gym leaders haven't changed, unless you count the fact that Fantina is now the 3rd gym leader as opposed to the 5th, I do like some of the changed gym designs. Gardenia's was a lot less annoying and prettier than before, and Fantina's was a lot more enjoyable, trying to find your way through in the dark as opposed to solving math sums. Third, the characters. Well, you've still got Team Galactic, Professor Rowan, the gym leaders, etc., but I personally like the addition of Charon, despite him not doing that much, and especially Looker, acting kinda like your personal policeman, but also your friend. And the Battle Frontier? Well, sadly I haven't really played it, so I really don't have that much of an opinion on it. Sorry. But another thing I'd like to cover is the Distortion World. So the locations in Sinnoh were awesome, but the new Distortion World is not only amazing, but also tension building. Where do I begin? Well, How about the incredibly creepy entrance Giratina had just before he pulls you, Cynthia and Cyrus into the distortion world with him? While you're there, you'll start to notice that the distortion world is rather unsettling, kinda like The Shining. But as you progress, you get more and more nervous each step you take. Gravity is also messed up, well, aside from the boulders. And the Pokédex even says that the distortion world is a reverse side to ours, which may have speculated to be hell, with Giratina being the devil. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So the distortion world is awesome, and to be honest, it makes the fight with Cyrus even more awesome. Speaking of Cyrus, he's also been altered in Platinum, or rather his team has. It went from Gyarados, Weavile, Crobat and Honchkrow, and he has now added a Houndoom. In my opinion, that's the best party of any NPC ever. And he's powerful too. I mean, his Weavile's even higher level than the mascot legendary itself. And on that topic, I'm going to talk about the battle with Giratina. This is, by far, my favourite legendary battle in the entire series. Not only is it after the awesome battle with Cyrus, but it also has an incredible build-up. After you beat Cyrus, all that's standing between you and Giratina are 3 floating stones. After each stone you pass, you'll see Giratina's shadow flying past before he descends onto you with all his power. And the fight? It's awesome. Giratina is now in its grissiest stage, giving it more offensive properties, making it even harder to take down. But that just adds to the tension. Giratina's moves also fit the environment very well in my opinion. These include Dragon Claw, Ominous Wind, Ancient Power, and its signature move, Shadow Force. And really, I don't want to spoil any more on this game, as I might have another list in the making that involves this subject. So anyway, I think that's all I'd like to say about Platinum. It's awesome, it's fun, and I award it the Platinum Medal. Take a wild guess. That's right people, Pokemon Black and White 2 are my favourite Pokemon games so far. What did you think I was going to do? Cup out the end with Red and Blue? Not on your life. Black and White 2 just take every other Pokemon game you've ever played and throws it out the window. Now, in terms of gameplay, I have to say that this game probably has the best replay value out of any other Pokemon game I've ever played. Not only because of the 300 Pokemon in the Pokédex, but also the sheer variety of Pokemon in almost every route of the game. I mean, since when could you obtain a Reap, Psyduck and Riolu before even getting your first gym badge? Since now, that's when. But that's not all. I don't know if it's just me, but I found what easily turned out to be my favourite playthrough of any game regardless of the starter I picked or the team that I had. Even if I thought the game was slightly lacking in flying types, I didn't find it much of an issue, because 1. A Crobat with acrobatics works amazingly anyway, 2. The available flying types in this game are awesome, and 3. The sheer amount of awesome Pokemon from other types in this game make you forget about that problem in the first place. Now let's talk about the story. Black and White 2 is set 2 years after the previous installments, and this is shown immensely as you journey through Unova for the second time. You start off in Aspertia City, which is far west from the town you started in before. This is also the first time in which you start off in a city with both a Pokemon Center and a gym. Early on, you'll see some familiar faces. Sharon is the first gym leader of the game, and Bianca is now Professor Juniper's assistant and also the one to give you your first Pokemon. You can also meet Alder before your first gym badge, who is now retired from his post as champion. There is also a nice mix between new and old gym leaders. There are some gym leaders that really haven't changed much at all, such as Clay, Drayden and Skylar. There are the old faces with new looks, such as Alisa and the previously mentioned Sharon, and some completely new gym leaders such as Roxy and Marlon Brando. Speaking of new characters, Black and White 2 provides many, but I am only going to go over 2 of them in a further extent. The first is Hugh, the game's rival. Some see him as a weak and soppy rival, but
I disagree.
This guy is my personal favourite rival in the entire series. More than Barry, more than Silver, heck, even more than Blue. You can say what you like about him, but there's no denying that he is a badass. His story is actually quite unique among other rivals in the series as well, having a bad history with Team Plasma and setting off on his journey in order to seek his revenge, rather than becoming a Pokemon Master. Now, he's cool, but I think my personal favourite is Colress. This guy is one cool dude. I wouldn't go quite as far as the improved N, but he was one of the most welcome additions to this game in my opinion. On the topic of Colress, he's part of the newly constructed Team Plasma. That's right, the criminal organisation has changed too. Some parts not exactly for the better, but just the right amount of inclusion in the game, unlike the previous Gen 5 games. Enough to find them a little intimidating, but not too much that adds a sense of linearity, which was the main reason why I didn't like Black and White 1. The motives are much more straightforward this time, albeit a bit cliche, and certainly not as creative as their original motives, but that doesn't really bother me that much. I also like the inclusion of only one Sage as opposed to 7, the Shadow Triads and their choice of Pokemon were cool, and I also like Ghet's new design, making him look much more darker than before. The new region provides a perfect blend between old and new. Places you've visited before, such as Chargestone Cave, the Desert Resort and Castalia City, and places that breathe new life into the region, such as Humalao City, Reversal Mountain, the Strange House and the improved Giant Chasm. Black and White 2 changed many things about their predecessors, and I'm about to list you through all of it, because I'm OCD like that. First, the key system. This isn't a feature I use too often, but I still like it. What it does is it changes the difficulty of your game, aka the levels of trainer Pokemon, depending on the mode that you chose, and normal by default. The challenge modes are also exclusive to each version. Challenge mode is in Black 2 and easy mode is in White 2. If you want to get both, trade. Simple as that. However, a feature that I'm more fond of are the 6 new forms introduced. These include both of Kyurem's forms, the Camitrio Therian forms, and Keldio's Resolute form. And in my opinion, they all look better than their original designs. I also really like the reintroduction of move shooters, which wasn't something we'd seen since Platinum, so that's good. And the fact that I could legitimately obtain one of my favourite Pokemon that I couldn't obtain in the originals was just fantastic. But you all know it. My favourite part of Pokemon Black and White 2 is not any of this. It is, get ready for it, the PWT. This feature, hell to the yes! This feature brings battles, and even more battles against both old and new characters coinciding together in whatever format you wish. That's right, if your favourite Pokemon character was from a previous generation, then chances are you'll be facing that character at some point here. You get to participate in 3 battles per tournament, where 7 of the major NPCs are involved, and it just feels great. It basically says, you remember that battle tower? Screw that. If you want some real Pokemon battling, then check this out. Personally, I love it, and I know a lot of people feel the same. It's simply Pokemon bliss. This is why Black and White 2 has my personal favourite post-game in the entire series, even more so than its predecessors that had half a region to discover after you beat the champion. Not only does it have my favourite post-game in the series, it also has my favourite soundtrack in the series by far, with the new rival theme, the new crime organisation theme, including the bosses, and the gym leader themes remixed. Oh, and I'm not just talking about the Black and White 2 gym leaders here. Oh no. I'm also talking about, I don't know, every other gym leader in the PWT. That is insane. I have to say, considering that Black and White 2 are direct sequels to their predecessors, it does provide a surprisingly large amount of new additions that were welcome to the series. I mean, if this is how they plan to finish Gen 5 off, then they did it perfectly. And considering this game had less than 2 years of development, that's saying something. This game has literally everything I look for in a Pokemon game and beyond, and that's why it's number 1. Thank you for watching my countdown on the top 5 Pokemon games. If you want to see more countdowns like this, then be sure to subscribe and leave a like or a comment telling me what I should do next. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are going to be released in the UK soon, and I'll be sure to do a review on that at some point. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.